Ready, camera, two, one.
Roll for record.
It was 3 hours long, had 11 candidates on stage, a great big jet, and NFL-sized ratings. By any measure, it was a great debate. I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. Joining me now to talk about the hits and misses, the body blows, and the dodges from Dallas, Texas, is author and PJTV contributor Scott Ott. And next to me here in sunny Southern California, stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser. NBC declared Carly Fiorina, Marco Rubio, and Jeb Bush the winners and labeled Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and Scott Walker the losers. The Washington Post called Carly Fiorina, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz the top winners, and Scott Walker, Mike Huckabee, and Rand Paul the most obvious losers. Donald Trump wasn't on either list. Debate host CNN labeled Carly Fiorina, Marco Rubio, and Jeb Bush winners, Rand Paul, Scott Walker, and Ben Carson the losers. And like the Washington Post, said it was unclear whether Donald Trump won or lost. Now, large media outlets like these certainly aren't the GOP base and have been wrong about virtually everything this election cycle so far, but they all agree that Carly Fiorina was the standout star of the debate. Let's go ahead and start out by taking a look at a couple of her best moments.
Anyone who has watched this videotape, I dare Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama to watch these tapes. Watch a fully formed fetus on the table, its heart beating, its legs kicking, while someone says we have to keep it alive to harvest its brain. This is about the character of our nation. And if we will not stand up and force President Obama to veto this bill, shame on us.
You know, Scott Walker said that the media already had the narrative written that Carly Fiorina was going to be the big winner of the debate before the debate started. Did she actually win the debate, or is Scott Walker right?
Scott Walker's wrong. The media may have wanted it to go that way, but there was more pressure on her because they had to amend the rules to get her in, because they had to, rethink how they were looking at the polling. So I think all the pressure was on her. There was a lot of pressure on Walker in this round because a lot his benefactors are ready to bail at a moment's notice right now. But she had a lot of pressure on her, and I think she did fine. She keeps doing fine all along. And one of the reasons she does fine is because she doesn't always get drawn into the personal one-on-ones. There were a couple times she and Trump went directly at each other, but one of the first times when they tried to contrast over immigration, she started punching at the Democrats again, and that's what she does well. That's why a lot of people like her right now. She goes after the Democrats, she goes after Hillary, and she's relentless about doing both.
Scott, did Carly win? And if so, was it a TKO or did she win on points?
Well, I think it's absurd to think that somebody wins in an 11-person contest. It's just, it's like declaring at the Sweet 16 level that the winner of the NCAA basketball championship has been declared. However, I like to look at these things and say who did well, who didn't do well. Carly Fiorina clearly did well. I mean, she was lucid, she was on point, she was prepared, she was unflinching, she wasn't afraid to go after the 800-pound gorilla in the room, who in this case is literally an 800-pound gorilla, and she wasn't afraid to be bold and go after her Democratic opponents. So, she hit on all scores. And frankly, I was a big Scott Walker fan early on, read his book, loved it, loved what he did in Wisconsin, love him as governor of Wisconsin. That was pathetic, Scott. You're whining about somehow, it's like after a basketball game going, oh, the refs, were calling it on behalf of the other team. That's absurd, Scott. Face it, you haven't figured out a way to get your message across, and you're failing in this, and she's succeeding.
Well, that wasn't the only headline that Fiorina earned from the debate. She also mixed it up with Donald Trump about her face. Take a look.
Ms. Fiorina, I do want to ask you about this. In an interview last week in Rolling Stone magazine, Donald Trump said the following about you, quote, "Look at that face. Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that, the face of our next president?" Mr. Trump later said he was talking about your persona, not your appearance. Please feel free to respond what you think about his persona.
It's interesting to me. Mr. Trump said that he heard Mr. Bush very clearly and what Mr. Bush said. I think women all over this country heard very clearly what Mr. Trump said.
I think she's got a beautiful face, and I think she's a beautiful woman.
Now, Cruiser, that was obviously a rehearsed response. She knew she was going to be asked that question. Did it land?
It landed very well. I was watching this with about 200 other conservatives the other night, and that got a huge applause break there. I want to say this before we go on. I thought Jake Tapper was the big loser here the other night. I found his trying to bait every candidate into a one-on-one throwdown with Trump got tedious after a while. And I'm not even the hugest Trump fan, but I just thought that whole tactic, I mean, it was great for the ratings and everything. It just got really old after a while. Sure, they're supposed to be contrasted with each other, but let them all be contrasted. But it was like, how do you contrast with Trump? That was almost all it was all night.
Yeah, how about
John,
that, Scott?
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
For a second, because I disagree with you there. That was not a rehearsed answer, and the reason why you can tell it wasn't a rehearsed answer, unless she rehearsed it in the 30 seconds before she gave it, was because she built it off something that Jeb Bush and Donald Trump had just said. So they were having a little discussion, and Donald Trump had just said, you know, America heard very clearly what you said, or I heard very clearly what you said.
Wait, but that was the preamble.
And
that wasn't the punch. The punch was women across America knew exactly what he meant. That was the punch.
No, she said women across America heard exactly what you said. And that was a play off of Jeb Bush's thing. I'm not saying she wasn't ready to handle that question. She certainly was. But the way she handled it, Carly's gift in these debates is that she listens to what the other candidates are saying. She's not just sitting there waiting to vomit out her next talking point.
You know, there's something about her. I didn't vote for her when she ran for the U.S. Senate in California in the primary. I voted for Tom Campbell, my colleague at the OC Register. You voted for a different candidate as well, Chuck DeVore, great guy, former assemblyman from Orange County. There was something about her I just didn't like. And as I watched the debate, I still don't like her. I voted for her in the general because she was a Republican nominee and she was running against Barbara Boxer. But she has this Peggy Noonan breathless delivery every time she's asked a question. Like everything she says is so important that she's just out of breath, like a phone sex operator or something by the time she answers the question. Did you get that, or am I reading something?
I don't get that. I know the Peggy Noonan thing you're talking about very well because that does wear on me after a while. I was vehemently opposed to her in that primary back then, and I thought she was a horrible candidate back then. And that's what I didn't like about her. There wasn't a personal dislike. I just thought she was a horrible candidate.
She lost by a lot.
And I don't think she's a horrible candidate anymore. I think their candidates can evolve. They can learn. They can learn from losing elections. As you know, you're always saying that somebody needs to have held elective office or run for elective office prior to your Trump fandom. And yeah, that used to be one of your big things. Now, not so much anymore, but that's okay. But
this is true.
You learn from a losing. You hope to have learned from a losing campaign, and I think she did. That's what I didn't like about her then. I like her now. She's growing on me now. I like, I got to say, I've got outsider non-politician fever.
A lot of us do.
Yeah, big time right now.
A lot of us are breaking a lot of our own rules. Yeah. Well, if Fiorina was the underdog everyone ended up rooting for, Donald Trump was the top dog the other candidates were gunning for. But that's okay because Trump was gunning for them too. Right out of the box, he went after Rand Paul, and it was funny.
First of all, Rand Paul shouldn't even be on this stage. He's number 11. He's got 1% in the polls, and how he got up here, there's far too many people. Anyway.
I think really there's a sophomore quality that is entertaining about Mr. Trump, but I am worried. I'm very concerned about having him in charge of the nuclear weapons because I think his response, his visceral response to attack people on their appearance, short, tall, fat, ugly, my goodness, that happened in junior high. Are we not way above that? And would we not all be worried to have someone like that in charge of the nuclear arsenal?
Mr. Trump.
I never attacked him on his look, and believe me, there's plenty of subject matter right there.
I love this exchange between Trump and Rand Paul. And I've got to say, if any candidate looked desperate on stage during that debate, it was Rand Paul. Rand Paul was trying to get his mojo back. At one point in time, he was doing very well in the polls. Now, as Donald Trump said, he's at 1% in the polls. He's doing very poorly. Did he land any blows? Did he land any punches in this debate?
Oh, no. Nobody gets visibly rattled by Trump more than Rand Paul in this cycle right now. I mean, because Trump's gone after everybody personally. Some have handled it, some have ignored it. He hasn't gone after Cruz. He and Cruz have this simpatico thing because Cruz was the one guy that didn't go after him in the beginning. But Rand Paul, it shows how badly Trump gets under his skin, and then it becomes this thing where he's just complaining about Trump, and he doesn't present a positive message for what he's doing there. And he took the biggest hit by all of the snap polls so far on favorability, percentage, everything else. It looks like Paul took the biggest hit of anybody in this debate.
You know, Scott, everyone loves a redemption story. Someone that's doing well, that gets knocked down a notch or two, and then comes back. Does Rand Paul have the ability to do that, or does he look like a guy who's just wailing?
Well, I don't think Rand Paul's heart is in it. I really don't think he's got what it takes to be president of the United States in the sense of the grind of campaigning. He doesn't like raising money. His people have a hard time getting him to do it. He doesn't like campaigning he strikes me as a very sincere person. And it's very difficult for a very sincere person to run for president, frankly. And he doesn't. There are some candidates who are trying to look like a sincere person. I think he really is. And I don't think he likes doing this. Now, as for Trump, I mean, I don't know what that, Johnny, you've been drinking the Trump bottled water, because that was the most idiotic thing I've ever seen anybody do in a presidential debate, to start off with your initial remarks, and the first thing you do is take a shot at the lowest guy on the totem pole. Just a gratuitous slap at Rand Paul for no good reason at all. It's like it's like you're being quarterback on a football team and you go over and slap some kid who's sitting on the bench who doesn't have a chance to play. It was sophomoric, just like Rand Paul said. And I think the problem is there are too many people, and I don't know if you're one of them yet, who are already committed and they can't hear or see anymore.
I do admit I'm totally in with Trump. If the election were today, I would have no problem filling out my ballot. Now,
if the election were today, you should be committed, but it ain't today.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, a lot of us make up our minds at this point. And really, the question is not who is leading or who's ahead. The question is who makes it to the next round. Because we've already had Rick Perry drop out, and I suspect that by the next debate, we'll have another candidate or two drop out, and Rand Paul may be one of them. Rand Paul's been attacking Donald Trump. Rand Paul's been running it. Donald Trump's not a real conservative. Wait a minute. Rand Paul's the guy that wants to let felons vote. Yeah. And he's telling Donald Trump that he's not a real conservative? Give me a break. All right. In what may have been the sharpest exchange of the night, Trump and Jeb Bush also got into it. Let's watch.
The one guy that had some special interest that I know of that tried to get me to change my views on something that was generous and gave me money was Donald Trump. He wanted casino gambling in Florida.
I didn't want
Yes, you did.
Totally false.
You wanted it, and you didn't get it because I was
it.
opposed to casino gambling before,
promise I
during, and after. And that's not, I'm not going to be bought by anybody.
I promise, if I wanted it, I would have gotten it.
No way, man.
Believe me.
Nope.
I know my people.
Not even possible.
I know my people.
You got, according to to what you said on one of the talk shows, you got Hillary Clinton to go to your wedding.
That's
because
true.
You gave her
That's
money.
True.
Maybe it works for Hillary Clinton. It doesn't work
Jeff,
for anybody on this stage.
I was a businessman. I got along with Clinton. I got along with everybody.
Yeah.
That was my job, to get along with people.
But the
I
simple
didn't want
fact
to,
is...
Excuse me. 1 second.
No.
I didn't
want to...
The simple fact is,
Jeff,
Donald,
you cannot take...
More energy tonight. I like
that. Jeb Bush was trying to be Mr. Tough Guy. What do you think of Muscle?
I think he got an A for effort on attitude in this one because he didn't seem like he had just been woken up from a nap, which he did in the first debate. But whenever he starts to go for specifics, whenever he tries to get a specific message across, I'm stunned that this is all he's been focused on for 8 years, because he's awful. He's just terrible at that. I don't know. And then he's so awful with the answers that I just get the whole, oh, I'm doing this because Daddy wants me to do it feeling. That's the whole vibe I get from Jeb Bush.
Did Jeb Bush show any fight in him to you, Scott Ott?
He may have showed some fight, and frankly, I thought that this was Jeb Bush's finest hour, and that's kind of, that's not saying much, sort of. But I saw him speak at the Red State Gathering in Atlanta back in August, and I came out of there thinking that I had just been forced to sit in on an accounting procedural seminar at some big corporation where I had to listen to some mid-level manager drone on for 45 minutes. It was his best, it was his finest hour. But if Bush and others were smart, they would engage Trump not on the basis of Trump's personality or Trump's background or track record. I mean, Trump is out there basically saying, I'm the kind of scoundrel who buys politicians, but elect me because I can't be bought. I mean, that's just an absurd allegation. He understands how the game's been played because he's been playing it for years, but if you elect him, he's going to stop playing it and things are going to be different. What you should do with Donald Trump is talk about policy. Talk about what your plans are, your actual policy, because every time the conversation comes to policy and Trump is pressed, his answer is, we're going to be releasing that information in a few weeks. I'm meeting with some very smart people, and we're going to have the best people. I'm going to know more about that subject when I'm elected than anybody in the world.
After watching this debate, I think I've figured out Jeb's strategy here. Jeb, I believe, just wants to wait it out and be the last man standing. He wants Scott Walker to drop out and all of Walker's donors to go to him and endorsers to go to him. He wants Chris Christie to drop out and everyone in the Christie camp to go to him. John Kasich, the same thing. And if the outsiders fight over that piece of the pie and he's the survivor among those who are in elected office or the establishment wing of the party, then he can be the last man standing.
Well, in a normal year, I would say yes. I was asked about this on the radio this week, too. You know, the Romney thing, you can just wait it out and do the war of attrition with everybody else. But when the guy ahead of you has all the money he needs and is his own donor, that strategy is not going to work as well this time. There will be no, Trump's donor isn't going to flee Trump because Trump's donor is Trump. So that wait it out, Trump's still going to be rich next year at this time. He's still going to have plenty of money to spend on his campaign. So that old school Republican, the establishment money guy can just wait till everybody goes broke, isn't going to work this time.
Worked for John McCain in 2008.
It sort of worked for John McCain in 2008, but you're talking about two of the worst presidential candidates in the history of presidential candidates. I mean, that was just like choosing between different kinds of cancer. I mean, we really had nowhere to go with that.
Well, later in the debate, Donald and Jeb also fought over the legacy of Jeb's brother, W. Here it is.
Your brother and your brother's administration gave us Barack Obama because it was such a disaster those last 3 months that Abraham Lincoln couldn't have been elected.
You know what? As it relates to my brother, there's one thing I know for sure. He kept us safe. I don't know if you remember, Donald. You remember the rubble? You remember the firefighter with his arms around it? He sent a clear signal that the United States would be strong and fight Islamic terrorism, and he did keep us safe.
I don't know, you feel safe right now? I don't feel so safe.
Trump should have come back and said, from September 12th on. It
well,
worked out.
You know what? Here's what I didn't like about that answer. I mean, that was like a personal moment. You could tell Jeb was getting angry, but that's what all Bush apologists say. That's the boilerplate line. He kept us safe. That's what people who don't know George W. Bush say. And this is his brother, and the best he could come up with was a stock pundit line for George W. Bush apologists. I thought that was just awful. Even though you could see he's getting angry and he wanted to get in a bar fight with Trump right there and everything. I just thought it was like, if that's really what you got, that's your big personal moment, is to say what every other person on Twitter would say who still likes George W. Bush.
Scott, in a cycle where both sides are looking for outsiders, will the Republican nominee, whoever that may be, have to run against George W. Bush and the Democratic nominee have to run against Barack Obama because they know there's so much discontent out there? Is that almost a requirement for this next election?
I don't think the Democratic nominee will have to run against Barack Obama. I think that they'll embrace the good stuff and everybody will forget about the bad stuff, because ultimately, when it comes down to it, the Democrats aren't about the individuals. They're about Democrats, and they're going to elect Democrats. And it doesn't matter who the Democrats put up. Bernie Sanders will all of a sudden become a centrist Democrat if he's the guy that gets the nomination, and everybody will rally behind him. I don't have that kind of a jaundiced view about George W. Bush's presidency. I believe he, like many presidents, made mistakes. I don't like a lot of the stuff he did. But I'll tell you, Stephen Cruiser, I thought that was Jeb Bush's line of the night. Now, maybe that's because I don't think, like somebody who is, all caught up in the political geekery and the back and forth of it, I don't think of that as being some standard talking point. I think of that as the kind of truth that when people hear that, they go, you know what? We thought we were all going to be soaked in Jet A and gagging on smoke and jumping out of windows after that happened. We didn't know what was going to happen next. And not only did he stand up on, shortly after September 11th in that pile of rubble and call out the people who did something about it, but he devoted the rest of his presidency to relentlessly pursuing the kinds of people who would do us harm like that. Donald Trump's comeback to that was as pathetic, because essentially he was blaming George Bush for what Barack Obama did.
Well, Trump also went after Carly Fiorina as a businesswoman. Here it is.
Mr. Trump, why would you be better at creating jobs than Carly Fiorina?
Well, let me just explain. The head of the Yale Business School, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, wrote a paper recently, one of the worst tenures for a CEO that he has ever seen, ranked one of the top 20 in the history of business. The company is a disaster and continues to be a disaster. They still haven't recovered. In fact, today on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, they fired another 25 or 30,000 people, saying we still haven't recovered from the catastrophe. When Carly says the revenues went up, that's because she bought Compaq. It was a terrible deal, and it really led to the destruction of the company. Now, one other company before that was Lucent. Carly was at Lucent before that. And Lucent turned out to be a catastrophe also. So I only say this, she can't run any of my companies. That I can tell you.
Ms. Fiorina.
And Carly Fiorina said, well, the board that fired me said that they made a big mistake, and the chairman of the board took out an ad in the New York Times saying that Carly would make a great president, and Steve Jobs got fired a couple of times, so being fired isn't necessarily the worst thing. She fired back and said, well, Donald Trump, you filed for bankruptcy a couple of times, so none of us are perfect. The issue of her tenure at HP became a huge liability for her in California when she ran for the Senate. She was never really able to sell her time at HP as a successful tenure. Is that going to dog her during this entire campaign?
I think the time and distance may have helped in that a little bit right now. I mean, the whole thing with the tech bubble is Bill Clinton's still taking credit for having gotten to be on the upside of that tech bubble, and then Carly had to be the CEO on the downside of that tech bubble, which had a lot to do with it then. So I don't think it's going to hurt as much as it did then. In California, it hurt a lot because we're still stinging from the tech industry fleeing here anyway. They're fleeing because of the Democrats, but still, there's a lot of sting about that going on here. There's, you know, Silicon Valley, they're even the hardcore libs are starting to look for ways to do business in other states, and they've been doing that successfully for a while. So I don't think it's going to hurt as much now. I think she handled that very well the other night because it's being kept in the framework of just something that Trump is attacking her with. Nobody else is really going after her on it yet. If everybody starts, maybe it becomes a bigger deal, but right now I don't think it's hurting her as much as it, and I remember how much it hurt her then. I don't think it is right now.
You know, Scott, I was watching Don Lemon last night on CNN, and he had that prof at Yale University on, and he corroborated everything that Donald said. How does she get out from behind the eight ball about her tenure?
Well, you know, I pay a lot of attention to guys from Yale University and what they say, especially big Clinton supporters from Yale University. You know, here's the challenge with this. If Donald Trump has a legitimate point, and I'm not a business analyst, okay? I don't have a subscription to Harvard Business Review. I don't know how to evaluate Carly's tenure at HP. I do know that she was pushed out, and she's never been shy about that there was a boardroom brawl and she was forced out. There were people who were part of that board who fought valiantly to retain her and failed and have later stood up and said, look, we made a major mistake getting rid of this woman. I know that. But here's the thing. If you've got an allegation about a business enterprise, business is like baseball. There are statistics about everything. Donald Trump did no preparation for what he said. Somebody said, hey, by the way, there was a guy in Yale who said she was a disaster. What did he say about her? She was a disaster. She was a catastrophe. Give us the numbers, Donald. You've made your life being able to evaluate the numbers, and you can't tell us a darn thing about what happened at Hewlett-Packard?
Well, the guy from Yale who was on CNN said that the acquisition of Compaq was a huge mistake. He went through the numbers and talked about their profit margins compared to other profit margins from people in the industry and said that they weren't comparable in any way, shape, or form. And that Compaq was a company that was selling hardware at a time when everyone else was moving in the opposite direction, and she went back into the past. That was the explanation.
Well, you know, I used to work at Time Warner Cable, and while I was at Time Warner Cable, AOL bought us. So when's the last time you got an AOL CD in the mail? I mean, the tech business is the most volatile sector. There are great ups and downs, and I think Carly has a certain point. And again, I'm not saying that she did the right thing. But I have a friend who does investments, and he said over the last, I'm throwing out numbers here, but over the last 30 years, there have been 300 corporate mergers between major corporations, and 301 of them were a bad idea. You know, it's for some reason, a lot of CEOs and boards get sucked into that idea of the synergy that's going to come from putting things together like that. The guy who AOL put in place to run the Time Warner AOL institution was going to last for the ages, and it collapsed. HP still exists. I have an HP printer right now downstairs in my house. It works very well. And there are some people going to look at this and go, you know what? There are a lot of companies that aren't around anymore.
All right, I'm going to hit you with some questions, quick answers.
Piggyback on that, and then we'll go to this. Rupert Murdoch made Tom from MySpace a very rich man.
That's very true.
Tens of millions of dollars. How's your MySpace page doing right now?
Let me dust it off.
I forgot to update that.
All right. Who doesn't get a ticket to the next debate? Who's the next Republican to drop out?
Got to be, I think it's Rand Paul took the biggest hit, I think. I don't think Walker helped himself. Walker needed to have a huge night, and he didn't. But I think Rand Paul has just been like in quicksand for these first two debates. And he thinks that the stick is going to be saying something bad about Trump that's going to pull him out. And it's just a little teaser stick like this, and then he misses. So
he's dropping out before Jim Gilmore or George Pataki?
Well, Gilmore has no money, right? Gilmore has no money to lose. He's not paying anybody, and he's not going anywhere. So there's nothing to lose there. So I thought you meant of the upper tier ones in this debate.
No, of all the candidates, who's the next one to drop out?
I'm pretty sure it's going to be Paul. I don't know where the Pataki money's coming from either. He may be the next to go. Huckabee's going to have all the evangelical money, and we know that Santorum has one sweetheart evangelical funder. So I think they're going to be okay for a while.
Okay, Scott, who doesn't get a ticket?
Sadly, I think my buddy Scott Walker is going to be one of those. I'm not sure about Rand Paul and guys like Jim Gilmore or George Pataki because, as Cruiser indicated, if you've got no infrastructure, you've got no expenses, and it's okay if nobody gives you any money. And because of the whole social media kind of phenomenon going on, I mean, we got guys who are allowed to go on stage when their polling numbers are under 2%. So you could probably limp along for a while like that.
I think you're right. I think Scott Walker's the next one to go.
I think Rand Paul, if he could tap his father's donors, but I think most of them are Trump people right now.
Does Carly Fiorina now have a chance to actually win?
I think she really jockeyed herself into strong VP contention at the very least in this. So we'll see how this translates.
That's not a yes.
I think to win, to beat Trump, I don't know how that works. I'm not pretending to know how that works in this election.
So I'll take that as a no.
So I'll say, but I think she's on the ticket now, at the way things stand today.
Okay, so Cruiser says no. Scott, what do you say?
I think she can win. I don't know that she will win, but I think that she can win. And, especially if she survives into that final four round, because as I've said before, a lot of people are willing, as you are, John, to flirt with the idea of having an absolute moronic lunatic as president of the United States because...
I'm not flirting. I'm giving it up, Scott.
I know.
I'm doing a lot more than flirting.
Yeah, well, I don't want to know about that. But a lot of people are saying that now, but when it comes right down to it, they're ultimately going to say, you know what, am I really going to tell my grandchildren that I voted for this gas bag who doesn't have a plan?
Now, wait a minute. You've been going after me for making up my mind that I'm going for Trump, and it sounds to me like you've made up your mind that you think that Trump is a buffoon.
No.
So you've made up your mind the same way I have.
That's true. Yeah, but the thing is, I think I'm not saying you shouldn't have discernment. I'm just saying your discernment is poor.
Wow. And you go after Trump for taking personal shots, Scott. I can't believe it. All right, next question.
He's the leader. I punch up now.
Does Jeb Bush fight another day?
Oh, he's got plenty of the Capitol Hill Club money sitting there right now, and he didn't do anything to scare it off this time around. I don't think anybody was there going yay, yay, yay. But I think that he maintained, so I think he'll be okay for a while.
Scott?
Yeah, he'll hang in there till the final 2 or 3, and I frankly I do think they were his buddies because I've hung out with enough establishment Republicans to know that they were patting him on the back afterward and saying that's the Jeb Bush I know.
CNN, did they do a good job?
I thought Tapper was awful. Absolutely awful. I didn't like this one any better than I liked the first one. I thought when Hugh Hewitt finally got around to asking something, it seemed like he had disappeared for a while, but I thought Tapper was just pretty awful the entire time.
Scott?
I think I wrote about this on PJ Media the day of the debate, before the debate happened, that Tapper went in with this whole philosophy, and I'm sure he got this from his commanders above him, but he went in with the whole philosophy that it would be a great debate if we could get them to fight with each other. And obviously, bear baiting and cockfighting is still popular in the halls of the mainstream media. And so that was their philosophy. If that's what you want, if you wanted to fight, I think Jake Tapper did a good job. Where I think he fell down and where it could have been much more illuminating, which is what he said he wanted, is that the fights should have been over policy matters, not over, hey, so-and-so said something about you. You want to smack him in the teeth?
Yeah, that was awful.
We're out of time, and I just want to pat myself on the back. I didn't take one shot this entire time at Scott Ott's physical appearance, even though I had plenty to work with.
That was beautiful. Even though there's a lot of material with which you could have done that.
I think you look handsome as hell with this guy.
That's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. Who won the debate? More importantly, who lost? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.